Welcome everyone. We're excited to have with us tonight Tina Ingraham to talk about her show that you're sitting in on balance. Just a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. So Tina's going to talk for a bit and then take questions. And just so you know, we live stream all of the talks on Facebook. And if you are watching on Facebook and you want to ask a question, just type it into the comment section and I'll read it to Tina here in the gallery. And then if you ever miss a talk, just so you know, we put recorded versions later on YouTube, and also a version stays on Facebook, but the YouTube one's better because it's cleaned up. So you can just go in, put in Greenhut Galleries on YouTube and find any of our talks that we've ever had, including Tina's past talks. So now a little bit about Tina before I turn it over to her. She's originally from Kenton, Ohio, and she received her Bachelor of Science in Design at the University of Cincinnati, and later an MFA from Brooklyn College, where she studied with Leonard Anderson. She's received a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Milton and Sally Avery Fellowship, grants from the Pollock Krasner Foundation, and Maine Arts Commission. Her residency fellowships include McDowell Colony, Dorland Mountain Art Colony, and the Robert M. McNamara Foundation. Tina lived and worked in Italy for several years to study masterworks that are integral to her painting. She's taught at the International School of Painting, Drawing, and Sculpture, Bowdoin College, Hyde School, Brooklyn College, and Stevens College. Her work is in private and public collections internationally, and this includes her portrait of Joshua Chamberlain that was commissioned by Bowdoin. And you may have seen her harbor fish painting in the front window. She's done a number of harbor fish paintings, which we'll probably talk about.
Probably.
But yeah.
Yeah, probably.
And those paintings have appeared in Carl Little's and David Little's Paintings of Portland, and in Carl Little's Paintings of Maine, a New Collection. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tina.
Thank you, John. It's so great to be here this evening. It warms my heart to see all your smiling, inquisitive faces. And thank you, the crew. I want to thank the crew at Greenhut Galleries, and hi, Dean, and Kelly and John. Hi, Roy, thank you. And Kelly and John at Coe Street Galleries for bringing my exhibition On Balance to fruition. So what is it about a painting that holds on to me when I stand in front of it? A painting I might have seen in a museum or a gallery. What is it about that painting? Is it color? Is it content? Is it scale? What is wowing me about that painting? Does it make me feel like I want to be in the painting? I want to maybe learn more about that painter, their history, that painter's inspiration. It makes me sometimes even want to be able to paint like that painter. I've had that feeling before. So what is it that pulls me into the painting? That grabs at my heart, possibly rocks my soul, inspires me, informs me. So I am going to, to repeat, is it scale, color, or content, or something else? So I'm going to mention 3 paintings that I have seen in the past that have done that for me. 3 paintings among many. In 1998, I saw the Vuillard exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the painting Le Canet, the view of Le Canet, roofs, did that for me. It pulled at my heart to the point where tears came to my cheeks, down my cheeks. I was so amazed. And the painting wasn't large in scale, it was moderate in size. The color was like sunlight. It was bathed in this warm light, a view of the mountains, the distant water, a village with those clay rooftops. And then in the front, there is the lower edge of the painting, not edge, but the lower part of the painting is a farmer in his garden, rows of vegetation and his donkey. And that painting brought such joy. Just talking about it makes me want to, brings back that moment. So for that painting, it was its content, about everyday life, the beauty of the earth, a fellow working in his garden, and the color. In 2001, I was in Bologna, Italy, and I was at the Armory show there. Many galleries were showing hundreds of paintings. The one painting that I still recall vividly is Table by Antonio Lopez Garcia. It wasn't a terribly large painting, it was moderately large, of a table scene, an everyday table scene where a mature woman, possibly a mother or aunt of a younger girl, a smaller girl, set off at the back of the table. They're obviously at the table for a meal. And the first thing that struck me was how the head of the mother or more mature woman was painted. Garcia, I think, painted her head downward at first, changed his mind, lifted her head, and however, he left the eye in profile and the eyebrow in profile in the same place it had been for a downward looking head. So the eyebrow and eye was on her forehead. So, but you know, that was the resolution of the painting, and it indicated some kind of movement. The most arresting thing about that painting was a pork chop set on the table on a white plate, and I came closer into the painting and really studied it. It was cut out of a magazine, a picture of a pork chop, either out of a magazine or a photograph that he had taken maybe of a pork chop, color, adhered to the canvas. And I was just so surprised that he did that he had the guts to do something like that. And however, today, or within the last couple of days, I've been thinking about that and have wondered, was he so skilled as a painter that he actually painted it to look like it had been cut out? So I don't know. I'd have to go look at the painting again. Anyway, that was interesting. So for that painting, it was content for sure. And recently, in 2022, I was in Washington, D.C., and had visited the Phillips Gallery and had the luck of seeing a newly acquired painting by them. They acquired it in 2021. A large painting, square, and the name of the painting is Not in Front of My Kids, painted by a fellow that was born in 1987, lives in Los Angeles. Aaron Mayer Corretoro, I think is how you pronounce it. I think the last name is Spanish. This painting, again, was another table painting. As you probably have guessed, I really enjoy table paintings. But the content of this work was incredible. But what first grabbed me was the color of the table and its composition. I saw it approaching it from a hall, moving into a distant room, and the color of the table, or the cloth on the table, was near a Pepto-Bismol pink. It was a neutral, middle tone tint of red. If that's the best way I can describe it as being a painter. So the color grabbed me first. When I went into the room, the painting really engaged me, because the painting's content was about, the subject matter was about confrontation. There was definitely an altercation going on. On the right side of the canvas, or upper right, are two children, really fearful. The painter really did an unbelievable job of painting fear in their faces. And they're embraced with one another, and the little girl is putting her hand on what may be the father or an uncle's hand. And the painter pushed that figure right off to the far edge of the picture plane, so that his arm, his left arm, was crowded right up onto the right side of the canvas, almost like a pipe going right, just holding that edge. He was dressed in a green and white t-shirt-like fabric. We don't see all of his head. He's looking down, but what we do see is the nose and a 2-day unshaven beard. So we know this man stands for power, for protection of these 2 children. What's engaging about this painting, or that really surprised me, is I was looking for what's causing all this problem. You know, there's no figure on the other side of the canvas. What is there, however, is a black spatula held at an angle, and it's just so menacing the way he painted it. The hand isn't even there, but you know it's being held by a hand. And how he painted the cast shadow of that black spatula was, you know, how Titian or Corot or Velasquez would have painted a cast shadow with, you know, transparency. This was matte black cast shadow onto the white wall. So this painting informed me color, content, scale, and composition. It's a really important painting. So if you're ever at the Phillips, I suggest you go look it up. So where am I? With questions and answers, I hope to explore from where I derived inspiration for many of these paintings, and possibly talk a little bit about process. I've realized my balance is an activity, a back and forth activity, kind of like learning to ride a bicycle. You know, a child hops on the bicycle, pedals forward, inevitably falls, gets back up, starts all over again, repeatedly pedaling forward and falling back off until that child masters how to ride a bike, right? So I wanted to read to you, I live this cycle of balance. I paint more than anything else I do. I refer back to paintings I've seen, master paintings, contemporary paintings. I revisit my own work for inspiration, for information, and for wisdom. And that is what moves me forward into the gallery, into the studio, to paint the mastery of it. So I would like to invite questions. I invite you to offer observations, possibly share a painting that's meant a lot to you, to engender a conversation about this body of work. And I'm just wanting to know, does anybody have a question? Yes, Martha.
That's a good question. I had the lucky opportunity to see the painting of the girl and the older woman and the desserts on the table in a couple of different iterations.
Oh,
so
right.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you arrived at their, I mean, the little girl has quite the expression, very, very powerful. And
thank you.
yeah, and it was really fun to see where it came from and then where it ended up. So can you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. Do you want me to start from where you saw it to begin with, or the whole process? Because that white cake, that lemon raspberry tort, was a chocolate cake to begin with.
Yeah, do the whole process.
Okay. Yeah, it began as a chocolate cake. I had this idea. I began as a still life, actually. In my studio, I sometimes have 2 or 3 stations set up for various still lifes, so I'm not working on just one painting at a time. And this, if you'll notice some of the still lifes, I'm working with a window or a mirror. This still life was set up right in the middle of my studio, and at that point when I began it, I was unhappy with a wall, just a wall behind the table. And I considered different things of pulling the table up, adding a window in the background. And as it turned out, I decided from my experience of having painted a Tavola in 2002, which is a table painting that I did of my friend Ileana and her mother Dolly at their kitchen table. I did it in their kitchen, backed up against the cabinets when I was in Italy. And that painting actually sold here at the gallery when I came back to Maine. So I thought I'll add a figure at the back of the table, and the figure is actually my granddaughter. And I took her the image of her from a video that I had taken of her and caught her in various states in that video for each hand and for the head and the expression. She was thanking me for having baked for her a sweet cake. And it was a joke because she didn't mean sweet, she meant it was a sweet cake. So then the ranunculus, is that how you say that, floral? Ranunculus. So it started out as a chocolate cake. I bought a bouquet of ranunculus. The currants are there because I was inspired to paint currants because of the still life. Where's that still life? This one. I found, so I'm bouncing back and forth with my inspiration. And this painting, Reflections on a Good Idea, was about the idea I had to paint currants and pomegranates together in the same painting. This is a crockery that I found at a flea market, or no, an antique shop. This had currants on it. So I thought, it must be French, you know. Or very old. I've never seen anything like it before, but I got the idea while I painted a crockery for currants, so currants are going to go in that painting. And I bought scones, I bought the Valentine cookies, because it was right around February when I was working on this painting. So I decided, I knew this. Don't put something dark on the side of the painting that's receiving light. It makes no sense. So I had painted this chocolate cake. I didn't like it there, so I scraped it off, sanded it off, and replaced it with another cake. And then I went through perhaps 4 bouquets of ranunculus because I didn't know this about the flower, but it doesn't last very long. And I went through like 3 pints of currants because they turn dark and dark and dark as they're sitting there. So I added Oise River, my granddaughter, and then on the right, I was talking to my daughter about the painting, and I said, I'm thinking of calling this painting Celebrate Her. And she said, Mom, there's nobody else at the table. So I took my information from the Garcia painting table, the mature woman on the far right, and just decided to paint my image of a woman on the far right of my painting. So there I was inspired and informed by another painting. This painting, that image moved from someone that looked like my mother to a man. Then it began to look more like women, models that I had worked with in Italy. And then And at some point it looked like my daughter, so it's a combination of all these women that I've known in my life. So, does that answer your question? All right. Thanks for asking that, because that's a very special painting. Oh, and the door in the background, that doorway is from a photograph I took of my son's home in Arlington, Virginia. So I tried different styles of doors back there because I wanted another source of light. And so that gave me another dimension of depth to the painting, rather than just the wall that I began with. Yes?
How long does the cake last?
Oh, they can, that cake sat there and then I brought it home, and the chocolate cake was in my refrigerator for about 5 months. Because I thought, well, I might do a still life with a chocolate cake, you know. That one was there for 2 or 3 months, yeah. It's interesting having a cake in one studio because the fragrance of the butter and the sugar is always there. It's always there.
So how do you get from a cake to a typewriter?
Oh, very interesting question. Reference to the show I did 2 years ago, Stills and Scapes. In another show prior to that, I had painted an antique sewing machine. And so I had a vision about what paintings were going to be in this exhibit. I knew that there would be a variety. And so I was in the flea market in Brunswick, and I often go there just to see if there's something interesting that I might want to paint. And I saw this red typewriter. And because of the sewing machine, and because it was circa 1953, I thought, well, this show needs to have something of that sort. I'll paint the typewriter, but it was like $200, and I couldn't do that. So Matthew, the vendor, said, I'll rent it to you. And I said, how much? And so he rented it to me for $50, and I said, how long? And he said, however long you need it. That was so gracious of him. And you know, it reminded me of a high school summer class I took. I've often told friends of mine that of the courses that I took in high school, aside from music and art, typing has been the most beneficial in my life. I'm a very fast typist on the computer if my hands aren't shaking. And the painting brought back those memories. The interesting thing about this that I'll bring up is in many of my paintings, I will leave the bare canvas untouched, because my experience is that's where the highest white is. So this paper, aside from the glasses and its cast shadow, is the white of the canvas. There was one, I don't know if any of you remember or have taken a typewriting class when you were in high school. I'm going to date myself here. We had this this wedge of wood with a yellow tablet over it, sitting like a pyramid. And I had that over here, and I thought, if I'm going to go back, I'm going to go way back, you know. But it didn't work, so I painted it out. So I do that with my paintings. I'll add things, remove items. Yes, Michelle.
So if you have a little patch of white and you stain your canvas before you start, you must know exactly what you're going to do.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a drawing there. There's a drawing, and that, so when I did my underpainting, veil, toning, I'll stay away from that, and I'll stay away from it further than just that edge. I won't paint right up to the edge. I'll give myself some room for it to either grow. Always leave that area larger than what I envision it's going to be. The painting on the back wall, Time for Cake, that top strip of the sky is the white of the canvas. Yeah, and this here, this strip is the white of the canvas. And so that helps me scale the tonalities of the paint accordingly. Whereas if you look at master paintings like Rembrandt, the whites are applied in paint, in impasto. And so they're dark because that white paint is not as white as that white. So it allows me the ability to pull up the key of the painting in the key. So it's overall lighter in value, tonality. Yes, Chesley.
Somebody said with painting, you just have to put the right color in the right place.
Who said that?
But it's one of those sort of like, so simple that, oh my goodness. And what I love in your work is just these areas where there is a color that is just perfectly there.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you.
with those persimmons or pomegranates or the shadows, just think, oh my goodness, look at that. And I wonder.
Oh, they are persimmons. I said pomegranates.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Particularly the artist's table, is that what that is?
Painter's table.
Painter's table. I'm looking at that amazing green, blue, teal under the table.
Oh, yeah.
And my
Thank you.
question is,
Mhm.
in your process of finding a balance and falling off the bike and getting back on and changing the decisions, do you ever just put down a color and just say, okay, that's going to stay?
Yes, sometimes that happens. It's wonderful when it happens, like the top of the table, the small table. That tint of red, that light tint of red, that was painted pretty much right off the get-go. And it's the first time I've ever been able to put that table in a painting, although I've wanted to over the years that I've had that little table. What discouraged me about it was, yeah, it's a light tint of red, some would call it pink, but it's very dirty because it's been around for a long time. And I just went at it, and it looked so unbelievably real that I left it. And there's a portrait of Aislinn Weidel in my studio, 72 inches high, and I did that portrait from life over several months, and the foot, she's sitting on a stool, the foot that's on the rung of the stool, that downward foot, I painted one time and left it. It just sometimes, and then one has to decide as the painting progresses, am I going to keep that? And sometimes I'll work to hold that around the painting. I'll work around the painting to hold that. Thank you.
Staying with that for a moment,
Mhm.
say a word about the Cezanne book at the bottom. Is that more
That's
than intentional?
the
book.
more than intentional?
Well, I mean,
It was intentional. Well, actually, one of the things that I learned from Lennart Anderson a long time ago, one of the first things he said, when you're doing a still life, don't feel like you have to set it up. Just go about the room and look at what's already there, and that's your painting, you know. And so in my studio, I have a model stand that's about this high, and that dark blue gray underneath is the model stand, and the table is set up on top of it so that I can bring the level of the table up, and that allows me to stand and not have to be looking down at a table. I'm looking more at it. And on the model stand, when I'm doing these paintings, I'll often have different things on it underneath the table, like different items that I've decided, well, am I going to use this? Am I not going to use it? Different books to refer to. And that Cezanne book was there. And when I decided to do this painting, I'll just keep it in there. I refer to the Cezanne book. Why not have it in a painting entitled Painter's Table? It makes total sense, right? And just as a reference, this painting I did in response to another painting I did of the same size, of a similar, of this same table, called the Artist's Table. And I was originally inspired by the little painting by Vuillard that's at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., in that small gallery, I can't remember the name of it, of French paintings. It's a little painting about this size called Moss Roses and Artists. The Artist's Paint Box, Art Box or something. So when I've looked at that painting for many years, and when I found that earthenware crockery, I thought, that painting, I've got to do a painting with moss roses in it. And so I did Artist's Table, and then followed with Painter's Table.
Let's stay with that for a moment. Your previous question about the teal color, I can certainly see that there's an echo of the orange clay pot in the teal.
Hadn't thought of that. Yeah,
Oh,
there is.
You did it. I mean, I was just thinking about how. The one question I thought before I even came here, I wanted to work in, maybe I can ask it now.
Go ahead.
Once when I was working with you, spoke of developing a painting having a key, almost like a musical key, in the key of C or key of D.
Oh.
But do you sense that? I mean, I sense there's a key in the blues and oranges there. Is that a practice of yours?
Yes, yes it is. It's interesting that you bring up music, because if you really look closely, there's a folio with the name Debussy written on it. And that alludes to my music study of the piano. Yes, I do. And I'll tell you where I got that from. It was Marjorie Portnow, who's a landscape painter in New York, and she's painted the Hudson River Valley. And I first met her at Vermont Studio Center. I was there for 2 weeks doing a residency, and she was the artist in residence. And she said, Tina, and this was for plein air painting, but I do it for a lot of my work. Stand perpendicularly to the subject matter, and out of the corner of your eye, get a feel for the tone, for the key, for warmth, coolness, color, the whole thing, and that inspires you to find a way to begin. You know, if you look at Lennart Andersson's still life, there's this tonality to his paintings that everything lives within. And the drawings of Matisse, I saw those at the Frick in the early 2000s. Maybe I was back from Italy for a show or something. And Jack Flam had written the front cover to the introduction to the book, and it's a folio of drawings by Matisse. If you look at his charcoal drawings, He doesn't erase. He just keeps following that model around the page and builds up a tone, you know, a tone of grays and blacks from the charcoal. And that's tonality. And you can translate that into paint, you know, like the painting I mentioned of the view of Le Cannet. It was very warm, you know, so, yeah. Any other questions or observations? Yes?
So these two marshes, Tina, I'm just curious
Yes.
about them.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. What is your name? Anne, thank you. So this painting I began in 2014. It was one of 3 panels that I decided to do of Popham Beach. And I actually took them to the beach, sometimes by myself, sometimes with the help of a friend or an apprentice that was working with me at the time, and did the majority of the painting there, right on the beach. And it's been in my studio since then, and I think I entered it, I touched it again maybe after I moved my studios from Bath to Brunswick. And then I decided that I wanted to have some paintings about water in this show. And I went into it and I used the painting itself to give me the information that it needed to describe incoming tide. Excuse me. So, for instance, this foreground of the painting, of this area down here, was completely different when I started painting on it again this winter. What inspired me was the information that was already there. I had already entitled it Incoming Tide, but if you look closely, this area here and this area here is sometimes what you see where the water is starting to come in, you know, slowly. And it described that, and it's here, so I thought, I'm going to go with that idea and cover the landmass that was down here, the beach edge, and paint water coming in. So that's Popham Beach, Incoming Tide. And over here, again, I've revisited a painting that I did in, I think it was 2008, on site. That painting was entitled Meanders. And I was up on the top of Morse Mountain painting the view up there. And the painting was rather large. And I had to get permission from, what is it, Bates College, I think, owns that property. And I got permission to drive my gear up there because I knew I could not walk that hill, that mountain, with all this gear and this big canvas. So I went back and back and back and did that painting, Meanders. And the thing about it, when I went back several years later, realized that the trees here that were painted that height are now off the canvas. You can't see beyond those trees this area. So I used the image of the previous painting to paint this. And I just had so much fun with it. I just let go. The underpainting, when I finished the underpainting, it just looked so windswept. All the brush strokes were going low left, upper right, all over it. You know, it was like, and I worked very hard to keep that in the painting and to let those brush strokes show through. And what's really wonderful about it is that it's created this golden light that seems to be coming up from within the painting. Yeah, thank you, Anne. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Two of my favorite places, by the way.
Oh.
So geographically, doesn't this flow into that? Is that the right?
Actually, maybe by miles. Yeah, it would eventually. It would, because if you're up here on top of the mountain, that would be over in here probably. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. I hadn't even thought of that. Yes. Yes, David.
So we talked a little bit previously about your underpainting, and you were describing it here. I was curious about the artist's table and underpainting, and maybe you could go into your process a little more with that one.
Sure. Most often, the underpainting I use is raw sienna. And I'll put a large amount of paint on the glass palette that I use, and then I'll add into that quite a bit of solvent. And I'll use a large brush and just go for broke on it, you know, just cover the whole canvas. And I've learned that tone, I think I've used that in just about every painting here, except the florals, yes. No, this one, I worked on a white canvas, and you can tell because of the whites that are popping through. And here I've keyed that white spot down with a gentle veil of blue, transparent blue. So most often I'll use raw sienna as the underpainting. And then
With different values to it? Or
no, it's usually a fairly even tonality. I mean, you'll see darks and lights. I don't wipe it down. I just leave it freshly painted. But it is transparent. That's really important. I need to be able to see the canvas through the paint. And if you look closely at Degas, at Velázquez, at Monet, they do that. The masters do that. Their darks are transparent. And
So you draw after you do that?
sometimes I draw after, sometimes I draw before if I'm really anxious to get right into it, and then I lightly spray it with, if I've drawn it before, and I use charcoal, vine charcoal, I'll lightly spray it with a fixative, and then I can, you know, it doesn't have to dry more than a half an hour, and I can just go right over that with a veil of raw sienna. I don't believe, this one I worked on a white canvas, garden paintings. Yeah, the top one, that's a white canvas. The bottom one might be, I worked on a toned canvas. I can see it under the grass on the left. Raw sienna, yeah. Yeah. Yes, Elizabeth.
So, yes. I just have a question about titling your paintings.
Sure.
And how you get to the point. And the one thing that makes me curious is the number of garden paintings you have here. Most of them are like generic, like autumn type going into, but this one has a name attached to it. So.
Which, oh, Jesse's garden.
At what point do you decide to keep it more open, and when do you get to the point where you feel like it has to be identified?
I can't come up with another title. 3 of the paintings I did in Jesse's garden, and that was my daughter-in-law, Tim, my son's wife. So the garden paintings were done after, in the process of recovering from lung surgery that I had last year. So I wasn't able to go far afield to paint the garden paintings, but I wanted to get out and paint. So Mike's garden, where's Mike's garden? This one over here. He's my neighbor. He's right next door to me. So I had all of my gear in my garage. So all I had to do was get out of the garage, walk, 15, 20 feet, set up and paint his garden, and then come back when I was tired. And I did 2 paintings of his garden. The other one is called August Garden. And then driving to my son's home in Portland, again, I pull up on the side of the road, pull the gear out, paint the garden. It was very easy. It wasn't physically demanding. This one, Fall Migration, was a neighbor. And this was the last painting that I did last fall. And I entitled it Fall Migration because a woman, several people stop by when I'm painting, and one of the women in the neighborhood came by, and she was telling me about her chickens. And she had chickens across the road. And as we were chatting, geese flew over. And it impressed itself on my memory, and that's the title. Plus, I thought later, in putting together this presentation, that, and entitling it that, oh, these are flowers that you see in the fall. So it's a bit of a, it works both ways, right? Yeah. Thank you for that question. Did I completely answer yours? You said wanted about the process. So the books on top of the table are pretty much the same books that I used in the painting artist table that came before this one. That's a sketchbook on the top. So it's music books and art books and a sketchbook. I'm glad you asked about this painting. So at first, I do a lot of measuring to come up with the drawing. And, you know, it's interesting. Everything is in front of me. But as I continued through the painting, I realized, oh, everything I measured pretty well. But where am I sitting? And where, you know, I'm in front of a lot of different eye levels. There's the book down below. There's the paint in front of me, the brushes are in front of me. So this painting is about various eye levels. So the book, we're looking right down on it. The table is a little bit less viewed. The top of the big table is even less viewed. And then the books at the back, you don't see as much of them. And then because the mirror is tilted, you don't see the tops of the book at all, right? So then I realized that everything had to be painted according to scale as far as where it sits in space. I remember once learning that, and I can't remember from whom, that when a painter is engaged in a canvas, that painter has to believe in that space, right? So if I had left the book the way it was originally painted, it would have been too large. So I had to pull it back and scale, and the paint tubes were too small, so I had to enlarge them because they're closer to me than the Cezanne book, right? It's down here, the paint tubes are here. The brushes were too short, so I had to let them grow and actually go past the back of the table. And so everything had to be in scale according to that their spatial context. So the only other thing about this painting is that I really liked after I had painted it was that the jar of brushes actually echo the bouquet of flowers, you know. And also, it supports, it's almost like the table leg. It's in place of the table leg. So I really love that painting.
And that was more happenstance than planned.
Yeah, exactly. And it echoed back to graduate school, hearing a painter coming into my studio, a well-known painter. He was doing studio visits. And I had done a portrait, a small painting of a friend of mine, and she's sitting at a chair, and her leg was in front of the chair leg. And he said, you should use that in your work, that things can be chair legs. They don't have to be a chair leg. They can be something else. So I remembered that in response to discovering that.
About that, am I right in thinking that Cezanne would not have worried too much about measurement or angles? I mean, tips, things are notoriously deliberately skewed, right?
Mm.
Do you think about that?
Oh, I do. And I use, like in this painting, that tabletop does not work in true perspective. That is a reverse perspective. And I learned that in using reverse perspective or altered perspective, not even altered angles and so forth, builds the space in a painting. It just does. So I was inspired to use mirrors with these still lifes because in 1996 I did a group of paintings, the Heather paintings, and I built this studio in a cement square. I had to create an environment in a cement square studio at Brooklyn College. We had this little tiny north light that was frosted. It was so austere. And so I went to Sears and bought a mirror, hung it on a make-believe wall that I bought, a huge sheet of Homosote, and brought light into the studio. And so when I was setting up still lifes in my studio for the previous show, there's this wall behind this table. And there's a window over here, but I wanted more light, you know. So I'm gonna use this mirror that the artist Ann Lofquist had given me years ago, put it on the shelf that's behind that table. I couldn't believe the space that it brought into the painting because you're seeing what's behind me, right? What's hanging on the wall behind me. And using, if you look closely at some of Lennart's, there's one painting of a table with a mannequin on it and a yellow plastic vegetable container. And there's a yellow curtain coming down on the side. Can't think of the name of the painting. He's used reverse perspective in that. You know, it's like your traditional perspective of things in front of a table in front of you will be larger in the front and will go toward the back, like in Time for Cake. I've painted that in correct perspective. The panels of the boards on the table are feeding back. Had I reversed that, it might have even built more space into the painting, but I didn't need it because I did have the space in the painting. I'm looking out a window at a distant, the Androscoggin River and the bank beyond that. So, but it does work. That's the best I can do.
That painting, Elizabeth and I were talking when we came here earlier about the scales there on the background on the right.
Oh, the balance scales.
Yeah.
What about it?
Yeah, what about it?
What about it? Okay, so I saw the painting, Woman Holding a Scale, Woman with a Scale, Woman Holding a Scale by Vermeer in 2022. There was that particular painting is owned by the National Gallery. And they also had an exhibit of several other Vermeers, and they were exhibiting x-rays of each painting with descriptions of what had gone underneath. But that painting, I thought, this show has to have a balance scale in it. I looked all over for balance scales. I bought one woman, a vendor at the flea market, gave me one, but it has something like McCluskey's Canadian whiskey written on it, and I knew that wouldn't work. And another vendor had a wee tiny one, and he also had one of those scales that's not with the cups, but one of these platforms. Yeah, okay, thank you for that. And so the vendor that had the little tiny scale said, guess what I found? I got a text from him. He showed me a picture of it. I bought it from him. And my ideas around, I gave so much thought about how to put a balanced scale in a painting. I was thinking more in lines of, you know, putting things in the scale. I tried stacks of coins. I thought of cupcakes, marbles. I thought, and then my son, my oldest son, and I were talking about it, and I said, you know, and I was also very much inspired by, again, Antonio Lopez Garcia's painting, Greek Head in a Blue Dress. And gee, that painting has engaged me for so many years. And in it, there's a blue transparent dress hanging on a hanger. And in the distance, it looks like a painted trailer park through the window and the shutter. And then there's this beautiful Greek sculpture of a Greek head, a bouquet, a clock, a theater ticket. And then in the Vermeer painting, the woman holding a balance, I didn't know this when I did this painting, but there are coins on the edge of that table. And in the background, behind the woman holding the balance, her head is framed in a hooded cape. The cape opens. Behind her is the painting of the Last Judgment. And there's a string of pearls on the left. And it's as if she's contemplating her pregnancy. Is she a Mary? Is she a Madonna? So I did some research and wondered if Vermeer, and I found out that most likely, because Dutch painters at that time in the mid-17th century did travel to Italy. And I'm wondering, had he seen the Madonna del Parto in Monterchi in Italy? And that painting is it's a fresco, the only piece of artwork that shows the Madonna showing her pregnancy. Her robe is parted, right? She's got angels on either side. Then there's, in the Vermeer painting, the Last Judgment. So I'm thinking, did Vermeer see the Madonna del Parto? Most likely he did. And was the woman holding a balance his response to that? Because her cape is parted. The Last Judgment is back there. She looks like a Madonna. Her head's bowed. And then I'm looking at this painting by Lopez Garcia that I've been looking at for many, many years, and I'm wondering, was that his Greek head with a blue dress? Was that his response to Vermeer, to Madonna del Parto? That's the interesting thing I find about art. It brings up the questions about communication over centuries. And so my response was to do this painting because I love both of those. I've seen all three of those. I actually haven't seen the Garcia painting, but I've studied reproductions of it. So the blue dress turned into a blue curtain. I bought curtain rods to cover my big window. I staged this, and I decided, my oldest son Alan said, Mom, the balance of justice doesn't have anything in it. And so together we discovered that the Vermeer painting in X-ray shows that he changed the balance cups from an angle to being straight on. Isn't that cool? So I thought, well, I'm not going to worry about this painting anymore. I'm just going to paint it level. And I tried using a mannequin of a head with my grandmother's hat on it, but it just didn't work. So I used a cake again. And when in doubt, let them eat cake. Right? And instead of a trailer park out there, I used the view from my window. And instead of a circular table like Garcia's painting, I used one of my tables. And then I just decided to put coins in. I've used money in still lifes before. And I've carried that yellow envelope around with me for over 20 years. So, yes,
Was it 8 minutes to 1? I'm sorry.
It's been 8 minutes to 1 for like since I bought the clock. I didn't want to mess with it. I just put it there. Yes, Michelle.
This isn't a question, but I was just observing the light and this painting on the back wall. I just could look at that forever.
Of the
Also, the still
of the
just
grapes.
the lightness, and comparing that to this painting here, which also has this amazing light, which just makes me feel light. But I noticed that there's this the contrast in that dark corner, and then the contrast in this dark corner.
Oh yeah.
And the amazing light in that. And I don't have a question, that's an observation.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I don't know what to say about that
Oh.
anymore, and that, which is just,
That painting, my response to that painting when it finally resolved was, I didn't know what to think about it as I was working with it. I just knew I had this problem of putting figures in it. When I was living in Italy, I was driving a Volkswagen Polo, a little car, and I found myself leaving a friend's home and driving on what they call a white road that had just been newly graveled. I got stuck. And it was too far to walk back to my friend's home, but I noticed a farmhouse up ahead. So I walked up the road and knocked on the door, and actually there wasn't a door, come to think of it. I walked up, I approached, and there was the entire family of 3 generations sitting in this beautiful, what we would call a breezeway, maybe a portico. Is that what they would call it, maybe? Is that the right word? I don't know. But there was this quiet, this light, this coolness that I can just put myself there into. And it was really hard to break that silence. They had just had their 1 o'clock meal, and I felt like I was disturbing their peace. And I asked to use the phone to ask my friends to come and get me out of this mess I found myself in. But that painting, the light in that painting reminds me of that time in that Italian family.
You know, with regard to the question of light, I'm sitting close enough to this to see that the canvas is quite evident, even not just there. And you use that to bring a lightness that you cannot get with paint alone?
Yes, letting that underpainting come through reads as gold. It's gold. If you look at this painting from a distance, it'll almost look like gold leaf. The painting that's hanging in the office, Interwoven Blossoms, that has, when you look at it, even look at an image of it, it looks like it's flecked with gold, and that's letting the underpainting come through.
Scrape paint off to get back to the canvas?
Sometimes, but this was just brushed on and left, like somebody else's question. This was just brushed on and left. This is all first strikes, what I call them. This is first strike. This has been scraped, sanded, painted again. Yeah. So I think it's time. Thank you, everyone. It warms my heart, your questions in this lovely conversation, for being here. Thank you. And I want to remind you to maybe take some invitations on with you and share them with your friends to come and visit the show while it's still being exhibited. And thank you once again. Thank you so much. Thanks.